Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about Flask. Flask is a Python's microwave framework used to build web applications. This will be a coding first introduction to Flask, and we are going to build a simple Hello World application using Flask. You can learn more about Flask in the official documentation available here. So now first make sure you have Python installed. So for that we can write here in the terminal Python. If you get such output, you have Python installed. We can exit out of this cell here. And now first let us create a virtual environment and activate it. For that I am going to use pipenv. You can also use venv or virtual env. So I am going to use this command pipenv cell to activate my environment. I have already created an environment, so it will not create another one for me. Now we have to install Flask. Pip install Flask. You can run this command pip install Flask if you have used venv or virtual env. I am going to use pipenv install Flask because I have created the virtual environment using pipenv. I have already installed Flask as well, so it will not take that much time for me. Now that I have Flask installed, let's go to the official documentation. In this documentation, we have a very simple example application that has just 5 lines of code. Instead of repeating this same trivial example, I am going to show you a slightly more elaborate one that will give you a good base structure for writing larger applications. This application will exist in a package in Python. A subdirectory that includes an init file is considered a package. When you import the package, the init.py file executes and defines what symbols the package exposes to the outside world. So let's create a package. We can create a package normally just like we create a subdirectory. So for that I am going to write app. Within that we are going to create the init file. So the name will be __init__.py. Inside the init.py file, we are going to have some code. So let me write first from Flask import Flask app is equal to Flask __name __ from app import routes. This script simply creates the application object as an instance of the class Flask imported from the Flask package. The name variable passed to the Flask class is a Python predefined variable which is set to the name of the module in which it is used. Flask uses the location of the module passed here as a starting point where it needs to load associated resources such as template files. But we are not going to use any template files here. For all the practical purpose, passing name is almost always going to configure Flask in the correct way. The application then imports routes module which doesn't exist yet. Now you might get confused with these two apps, the red one and the yellow one. We'll talk about this later. Another peculiarity is that the routes module is imported at the bottom and not at the top of the script as it is always done. The bottom import is a workaround to circular imports, a common problem with Flask applications. You are going to see that the routes module needs to import the app variable defined in this script. So putting one of the reciprocal imports at the bottom avoids the error that results from the mutual references between these two files. So what goes in the routes module? The routes are the different URLs that the application implements. In Flask, handlers for the application routes are written as Python function called view functions. View functions are mapped to one or more route URLs so that Flask knows what logic to execute when a client requests a given URL. So let's create our routes module inside the app package. So we are going to create routes.py file. Inside that I'm going to write from app import app app.route app.route index, not here, this single quotes will be here. Then we have to define our view function. Define index as return hello world. So we have written our first view function. The view function is pretty simple. It just returns a greeting as a string. The two strange app.route lines above the function are called decorators, a unique feature of Python language. A decorator modifies the function that follows it. A common pattern with decorator is to use them to register function as callback for certain events. In this case, the app.route decorator creates an association between the URL given as an argument and the function. In this example, there are two decorators, the first one with a slash and the second one with /index. This means that when a web browser requests either of these two URLs, Flask is going to invoke this view function and return the value back to the browser as a response. If this does not make complete sense yet, it will. You have to just wait. To complete the application, we have to write a Python script at the top level. So let's create that script. Let's rename it as main.py, and inside that we are just going to have a single line from app import app. Here also we have the same two app entities. Here you can see both together in the same sentence again. The Flask application instance is called app, and it is a member of the app package right here, this one. And from app import app statement imports the app variable that is a member of the app package, this one, the red one. So this is the variable. And if you find this thing confusing, you can rename the either of the app, the package, or the variable to something else. It's all about you. Now, just to make sure, you can match the directory project structure here. So we have the app package here. Inside that we have the init.py file and the routes.py file, and we have a top level Python script called main.py. Now, believe it or not, we are going to have the first version of the application complete. So the last thing we have to do is to write here export Flask app is equal to main.py. So if you are a Windows user, you can use set instead of export. Now we can write Flask run to run our application, and yes, we have the server running, and when we type this URL in our browser here, we can get the hello world. The output from Flask run indicates that the server is running on the port on the IP address 127.0.0.1 and the port is 5000. This address is so common that it has a simpler name that you may have seen before, localhost. This IP address is called localhost. Network server listens for connections on a specific port number. Applications deployed on production web servers typically listen on port 443 or sometimes port 80 if they do not implement encryption. But access to these ports require administrator right. Since this application is running in a developer environment, Flask uses the freely available port 5000. Now we have this Flask server running. We can also write here /index and the same response we will get. So we have the same response again. So what we see? We can see that whether we go to this URL or this URL, we have the same response because the same view function is being called. If you are done playing with the server, you can just simply write Control C here and it will stop the server. So congrats, we have completed the first big step to become a web developer. You can read this blog, the Flask Mega Tutorial Part 1 Hello World, and get an overview of how Flask works.